are many, many postulates and things that we live by in astrology that can now be tested and proved. Imagine how that will change people's consciousness if we built that.
That's a good point. We've forgotten astronomy a little bit. I mean, is there any place where they can come back together?
What the wonderful question just said, yes. First of all, right now, the United States government is suspending the space shuttle. The rest of the world is still alive and kicking, and the cosmos is not going to unfold as it should according to the agenda of the Republican Party. But that's what status quo is, and I'm not a political person. But she mentioned data mining. That is the technology of Uranus, you see, and Aquarius. And data mining is spying. That is the domain of Pluto. And deception on the lower octave is with the domain of Neptune. So deception, spying, and the internet make a very potent cocktail of negativity. And if the collective consciousness, due to indoctrination, personal laziness, are just going to passively go along, you see, then you're going to have some problems start really entrenching themselves. But the opportunity is that we have Uranus and Aquarius and Uranus in Aries, New Beginnings and Pioneering Spirit, evenings like this, but you have, anyone can Google anything now. And people have direct access to a wide variety of opinions. So if you are being indoctrinated, it's really largely by choice.
Okay, but thank you. Is there anything about astronomy, the discovery of new asteroids? There's a comet coming to the planet in October. We'll be seeing it, the Leone comet that will be in the sky. Does that have any relevance about our collective action? Does anyone pay, Rebecca? You have
I mean, everything has relevance, first of all. Every little thing out there has total relevance, though it's just what is really flashing on the radar screen and what are the details. For example, between Mars and Jupiter, there's this huge thing called the Kuiper Belt.
Asteroid belt, right?
The asteroid belt, the Kuiper Belt, where many asteroids live. They're moving really slowly at a very eccentric orbit. Now, they're essentially blobs of rock. Asteroids are what formed after the major planets formed. They are bits and pieces that coagulated together. Our big planets are basically two large bodies where their cores merged into space, and it was a massive explosion. Asteroids are part of the debris that came out of that explosion. If you look at how asteroids and other elements were formed, it can tell you something about the meaning. For example, I would never do a chart with just asteroids. You're not just going to use the filler, what was left around, but they will tell you details and filling within the chart if you decide to use them.
So asteroids will have an influence.
They will, but it's less important. It's the details, it's the coloring, which often I find that, I mean, for me, I use the 9 planets, as I said, because they seem used well, they seem to tell the greatest story, and there's so much wealth within each planet. And I know of many astrologer friends that love the asteroids, and all. There's something to be said also for the new planets being discovered, because what Monte was saying before about how when each planet is discovered, our consciousness is ready to receive that energy. When Uranus was discovered, we're ready to receive the energy of standing up for our rights, individuality, revolution,
it rules democracy.
And before Uranus was discovered, that element was not in our collective consciousness. So the astronomers and astrologers have a really interesting relationship, and there's actually a lot of back and forth in as far as naming planets. They actually ask us to name the planets.
Who decides that it rules democracy, though? I mean, I'm just curious.
That's a question of observation. You see, democratic movements seem to manifest in ground during the discovery or major transits of the planet Uranus. They just didn't decide Uranus is going to rule democracy and revolution.
Right.
They watched it, mapped it, correlated it, recorded like scribes. What happens when this planet does certain things?
And the same thing with Neptune and Pluto and whatever.
All of them.
Okay.
And you really should, all the people all realize there are many systems of astrology. We're all talking tonight Western astrology, but there's Vedic astrology,
Right.
which is a different time measurement. There's Uranian astrology that Rebecca was alluding to. You know, they use a lot of theoretical planets even. But also, you were saying, what's really changing things? Let me just quickly get this out because at my age you forget things. When a new planet's discovered, what's dominant in the collective consciousness suddenly gets triggered up in your face. Well, they've discovered 2 planets, and the working names of them right now are Eris, E-R-I-S, who in mythology was the twin sister of Mars. And she was a feminine archetype that loved to cause trouble simply for the amusement of causing trouble. And she caused the Battle of Troy, for example.
Maybe we should call that planet something else, don't you think?
There was another planet they just discovered correlating with Eris, who likes to just be a troublemaker. And it's another female archetype called Sedna. We're starting to use different cultures to find our names. Sedna is an Inuit name. Now, what does it mean to you all when you combine a feminine entity that loves just to make trouble from the Arctic? Does that ring a bell?
Do you mean you get a coal or an ice age sort of?
No, you get a political leader that loves to just stir up trouble on a superficial level that happens to live in the Arctic.
Oh. Okay. Well, okay. Yeah, you had a question. Go ahead.
This question is directed to Rafi. I was curious, being a student of spiral dynamics, your perspective on waves of consciousness in astrology. I mean, my clients, I tell them right from the beginning that science is about subjective its, and that's not what astrology is about. I've always associated astrology to the mythic wave of development. And listening to these artists here, they've taken that to a higher wave of more of a transpersonal realm. And if you could articulate its limitations using the spiral dynamics, you could touch on that a little bit. I would find that interesting to hear your perspective.
Thank you.
Well, right. So there's a system known as spiral dynamic that traces the emergence of human consciousness through different stages of development, and the question was to connect that to astrology. I thought we were going to have another round, so I saved the punchline. But I'm going to try and kind of wrap that up quickly and bundle it into your question. So first of all, I apologize to the group and to Alan, who disappeared. I mistimed. Yeah. Okay. So basically, how did I reconcile the apparent bias of the zodiac with the universalism of astrology? And the way I did that, the lifeline that I had to grab was the science of consciousness. And it now appears that more and more there's scientific evidence that consciousness is a force of nature, just like gravity or electromagnetism. That consciousness is not an epiphenomenon, that the thoughts that we have actually have an impact on physical reality, right? Okay, and so once you buy into that notion, you solve the problem, right? The problem disappears. And the notion is that for thousands of years, millions of people have been projecting their consciousness skyward towards the planets, right? We have, prayers and supplications and rituals. We have been worshiping those planets as gods. Okay, now let's think about idolatry for a moment, right? So if you're an idol, an idol carver in ancient Chaldea, right? And you were given a piece of wood and you carved a little goddess figurine. Would you have an idol? right? And the answer is no, you would not. You would have a piece of wood carved in the shape of a female goddess, but it would not be an idol until it was consecrated, until a priest would recite the mantras, right? And open the eyes of the idol. That's what they did in Egypt. And today in India, they still do the same thing. They consecrate the idol. They give the idol Shakti. They empower the idols with consciousness. And so that, to kind of bring it a little closer to home, you go to church today, you got water and you've got holy water. And what's the difference between the two? Right? Okay. So now put yourself in the mindset of humanity thousands of years ago. You look up at the sky and you relate to these rocks in space, right? As gods. They are gods. They have consciousness. They move backwards and forwards. They have minds of their own, right? And you begin to worship them as gods. And so we are giving them a collective Shaktipat. We are empowering the planets. The planets had zero meaning. They were blank canvases until collective consciousness of humanity was projected skywards. Right? And so the meaning of the planets was a meaning that we imbued those idols in the sky with meaning, those gods in the sky. We awakened their eyes, right? And so the meaning, so astrology wasn't there for us to discover. We created the meaning. It's a collective consciousness. Now, as soon as you buy into that notion, then you solve the problem of the northern hemispheric bias of the zodiac, because the agriculture emerged in the northern hemisphere, right? You had the Nile Valley civilization and the Fertile Crescent and the Indus Valley and the Chinese civilization, and they're all above the equator in the northern hemisphere. And so the zodiac reflects that consciousness. Until much later, you had some horticulture, but no agriculture in the southern hemisphere. Okay, and I would make the claim that if in fact those civilizations emerged in the southern hemisphere today, what we attribute to Capricorn, we would attribute to Cancer. Okay, the meaning of the signs would be inverted because the zodiac was invented by human and empowered by human consciousness. Now, far from disempowering astrology, this empowers astrology, because now as astrologers, we can assume responsibility for the structures of consciousness that we project skywards. Right? So it's not like a planet is discovered and then a new structure of consciousness emerges. No. A structure of consciousness emerges and then a planet is discovered and then we offer it up to the planet. Okay, so that's the post-metaphysical astrological worldview, right? It's not that the meaning of the planets were there at the moment of creation or at the moment of the Big Bang. It is human consciousness, right, that has awakened those idols in the sky, and it's a magnificent project that continues today. And we can now assume responsibility as awakened consciousness and begin to empower those planets consciously. I envision as mainstream astrology becomes comfortable with this notion of just collective consciousness, right? Groups of astrologers blessing the planets, groups of astrologers projecting the highest, awakening the highest field of possibility associated with a particular sign, right? So that the rest of humanity can benefit from that particular state of consciousness. So it becomes a much more meaning. I actually envision a sort of like a religious revival of astrology, where we understand that the source of the divinity, of course, comes from within. But it is our divine energy interfacing with our consciousness that is actually giving the system its vital force and drive.
I just wonder if that makes sense to the other astrologers. Is that do you have anything to say about that interpretation? Anybody? No. Yeah.
Well, it's exactly, to simplify it, yes, ancient peoples noticed certain consistent events occurred with certain positions of planets. Mm-hmm. They then invented an archetype to understand the nature. Why does this planet out there seem to always be there when certain things happen? And that is exactly what Rafi said in a different manner. It was projection in one way.
So they notice the patterns, and
A pattern, yes.
which is how we discover the world, through patterns of perception.
Yes, events are always kind of right on astrological schedule, but the manifestation of them is absolutely individual according to where you are within the collective you're living in.
Rebecca, you had something to say about that? Did you just take the microphone.
Just to take that to an even more detailed level, for thousands and thousands of years, this is pure observation. You know, people, without TV, everybody for thousands of years was simply looking at the sky, that was the television screen, and making observations. That's it. And then, of course, they did their hunting and collecting berries and things. But there wasn't much else to do other than conquer more land, look at the sky, collect enough food. That was it. So these observations were extremely accurate, especially in the Middle East, where most of the work was done at this time, in what is now Iran. And their math was absolutely accurate. So they would notice things like, how come every time that planet and that planet are right here, everybody's having babies? And this was documented. And then the next generation would notice the things. And 100,000 years later, the same thing. They would notice whenever these two planets are talking, everybody's having babies. Whenever that planet is rising, we're going to war. So then they thought, well, that seems to be a good planet for going to war. So let's go to war next time Mars is rising, you know? And then they started to run their life like this and say, well, that's a good angle for hunting. So let's, you know, and of course, very early astrology was as simple as eclipses, new moons, and full moons. And then when to begin things, when things were ending, they would just notice there's always a celebration. There's always a lot of energy in the sphere when there's a full moon.
But that's a little different from what Rafi was saying, where he says we empower and as opposed to observe.
I wouldn't really agree with him completely there.
Okay,
actually.
that's okay.
I would say that, I mean, on one level, it's such a co-creation. On that level, yes, but the planet is a magnet. You know, these planets are magnetic forces. They all have a relationship with each other. They all pull on each other, and they all have a different, complete energy. They are individual entities unto themselves. So when we discover it, it's like it's discovering this whole being of consciousness. And yes, we can say I mean, what you said is that we project our own consciousness onto it. But there's much observation happening with it for many years, and we notice these patterns within it even before.
The co-creation.
It is a co-creation, yeah.
Wait, Monty and then Rafi.
Well, very quickly, I don't... when you say Rafi was using the word empowering the planet, he's empowering the human perception of the planet to create a certain reaction. And this is just so many millennia of very precise, constant observation of these things. Now, very recently, and I'll yield the mic, there was a couple, a man and woman, they were, what's the word? Mathematical actuarian statisticians. Now, that's the extreme minutia-oriented mathematical analysis of events and statistics, and they tell insurance companies when they're going to lose money or not through these cycles. Well, this couple set out to use their considerable formidable skills. Their name was the Gacquelins, right? They were from France. And they set out to disprove astrology once and for all from rational, logical thinking. And they wound up being absolutely bona fide convinced, so much that they wrote 5 books on the validity of astrology and thousands of case studies.
What's their names?
Gacquelin, Guaqulin, I think.
Okay. Did you have a response? Oh, because just take that mic. Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah. Well, this is why this is a completely different paradigm. And for me, at this point, it's self-evident. And, I understand we don't share the same perspective, and that's okay. But let me share with you, I've studied the evolution of consciousness very deeply in astrology as well. And once you understand the connection between the two, it becomes apparent. There is no way to understand astrology unless you enshrine it in a post-metaphysical paradigm, and you have what is the stuff of astrology? It is human consciousness, and that's it. It is human consciousness. It is a human science. Time to reduce astrology to human proportions. Not God or subatomic. It is human, 100% human. Now here's where it goes. 50,000 years ago, an ice age emerges. Life conditions change, right? Life conditions are very harsh. Life conditions are there. You're living in a perpetual crisis mode. And what's the social unit? It's the extended family. And what is your main concern? Your main concern is food and shelter, right? And you're perpetually in this magical state. You don't know what's going to happen next, right? And so what awakens the first, the oldest testament. The moon is the oldest is the mother, the original goddess, and you have the goddess figurines, right? Like the goddess of La Salle, and so you have a figurine of a woman touching her belly with the one hand and the crescent moon with 13 notches in the other. And what does that signify? It signifies as above, so below. It signifies some connection between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And so the moon becomes empowered. You pray to the moon because the moon is your connection. You make sense of life. You make meaning through your connectedness to the moon. And the moon is connected to the female reproductive cycle. And so the moon becomes a figurine. And so you have the 3,000-mile stretch from Western Europe all the way to China with these goddess figurines. It was the first global religion. The moon was the goddess. Then 12,000 years ago, something happened. Something fundamental happens. Now you need to think about this. During the Ice Age, the sun is what? It's like a little 40-watt bulb moving through the sky, this little wimp, right? It's not a very powerful force whatsoever. But then the Ice Age ends, and then all of a sudden the sun is shining. The sun is really powerful now, and so life conditions improve, and agriculture. You can now begin agriculture develops, metallurgy and agriculture. And so now you have granaries. You have granaries, which means you have confidence because you're not going to starve this year or in 6 months, or you have a couple of months or a year's worth of food. So what is it that emerges when you're feeling confident, right? When you're in a crisis mode, what shrivels up is your ego. As soon as you become confident, the ego asserts itself. So during the solar age, what emerges is the ego. And what is kingship? It's institutionalized ego. Right? So there's no kingship in the Paleolithic. Tribal cultures don't have a king. You need warrior consciousness. You need solar consciousness to give rise to a king. And so the sun is worshipped during the solar age, during the Neolithic. And then, you continue on and on and on. But, as far as the meaning of the planets, you have to create meaning. And you see a planet that's red, and you're going to have to associate that planet with some meaning. It's the god of what? What is it that's red? Blood. You cut yourself, you see red there, you see red here, right? And so there you go. That must be the god of war. Now, Venus, Venus is never too far away from the sun, so you're going to get to see Venus when? At sunrise and at sunset, the most beautiful times of the day. So you see this beautiful pearly vision hovering over the horizon at sunrise and sunset. And you're going to go, right? So what goddess is that? Well, it's the goddess of beauty. It's the goddess of love, right? Astrology is poetry plus astronomy. And when we understand that poetry is consciousness, and that when we project our poetic instincts into the cosmos, we're actually changing the very texture and fabric of the cosmos. Right? Then astrology becomes self-evident. If consciousness is real, there's so much science. I wish we could get into it.
We'll do it another time. But,
but anyway.
I appreciate that perspective. I'll just take like one or two more. You have a pressing question. But before you do that, I just want to add that I think there's also a subtle, intuitive understanding of the energies that contribute to whatever association. So it wasn't just the identification as red blood or Venus beauty. There's a feeling that's intuited by shamans, psychics, empaths. So yes, a question.
Thank you. It's my understanding that a person's individual birth chart shows their past lives in them as well. And that's the work that I do. I do past life regression. And right now I'm working on a book that is about how our past lives inform our present, and how by bringing that material conscious, we can create a new future. How does that work with an individual in their birth chart? Because I'm a Libra, I'm more concerned about the individual. When someone comes to you, how do you see that in their chart? Do you see that it was destined that they would make that shift? And how does someone's birth chart set parameters for how far they can evolve within the context of this one lifetime? Is that something that you can see?
Rebecca looks like she's excited about that question. Then you, Linda.
I'm
okay, go
also
ahead.
a past life reader
Okay.
and an astrologer. So, and I started reading past lives on the chart, which is very interesting. But the thing is, there's certain planetary aspects, the outer planets, are much more strong. And when they hit our personal planets, we don't have a choice. We really, now, the choice is how much consciousness are you going to gain? That's about the only choice, But are you going to have an experience that can bring about it? Absolutely. There's other planets you can always negotiate and go into denial and push aside until the next pass, so to speak. But just like we do in life, right? But I love past lives, and I think that when you do them, it allows someone to look at their life with a greater a detachment and see the same issues that they've played out over and over again. And it allows, often it's repeated almost the same way, it just with different, little different ball game there. But it's fascinating. So I love to use past lives.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, the birth chart is a moment in time, which is part of a continuum that something had happened before and something's going to happen after. It is one specific moment. And within that moment, you can surmise what's happened before. You know where the planets were before that. So you can see what kind of ground the person's coming from. As sometimes I call it a karmic DNA. What is in your soul's DNA, which is essentially the birth chart. And then to add on to that, there's these certain points in the chart that are called the nodes, the north and the south node, and they're a bit like suction cups. One is, they're not actually planets, they're points where the equator meets the ecliptic. The south node is often seen as what we're moving away from, but it is also like our hammock, our comfort zone in a way, and the north node is our trajectory where we're moving towards. Often the south node is seen as a past life symbol, and planets in conversation with the south node can often give insight and coloring into past life situations. But I will never say, like, you'll wear a red dress, eat a taco, slip on a banana peel. The birth chart will not go into this kind of, at least the way I read it. I'm not going to see details like that. I'm sure maybe in your past life work you could. But the birth chart, the way I read it, will give coloring and symbols and show what the person is working with in this lifetime. It is up to them completely whether they're going to take on the work or not. And certain people find it easier. And often I find, a recent observation was that certain people who have a whole lot of planets surrounding the south node, and the south node is the symbolic center of the past life or where you're coming from, your past karma. People who have many planets surrounding the south node might have had a near-death experience, past life experience, or early life insight into their past lives. They are much closer, the veil is much thinner between them and their past than somebody with all their planets into the north node, which is where you're going. And often it's quite easy to move forward when all your planets are in conversation with the north node, whereas the south node gives you more of an inward trajectory. But it is always up to the individual.
No, that's interesting. So we're going to do one final round, and they're going to hang out after. So if you have like that kind of personal question, do you have a question for like everybody? So everybody will be hanging out after this final round. They're going to do a kind of final run through, and then Krista's going to sing another closing song, and then there's drinks out here. And I just wonder if Julian, you have a comment, because Julian's a well-known numerologist, and he kind of deals with astrology, but he also has his own numerological perspective. You have anything to say about what you heard tonight?
You guys are great, and I love your perspective on astrology, as well as the importance of looking at the patterns and the cycles, because history repeats itself. And it's interesting that all four of you talked about the fact that we're in some very interesting times, not only in a spiritual upliftment, which is all about 2011, the 11 being a master number, the key to the door of the light of infinite opportunities, but also the fact that we need to be aware of the manipulation. We need to be aware of the false prophets. We need to be aware of even becoming addicted with texting and internet, as well as holograms in the sky and everything else that's taking place. So what can you leave us with in regards to what tools, what do we look in our charts, what do we do to really embrace ourselves as these spiritual amazing beings and not get influenced by the matrix, which is outside of us?
Great. That's a last great closing question, and that's like the final round. You can wrap it up and tell people also how to get in touch with you and all their books and everything.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so Pluto's in Capricorn, and Neptune is in Pisces, and those two planets are sextile. They are stimulating each other. They're tickling each other. And so they'll work well together. The two processes that each one of those planets represents complement each other at this stage. And those two planets are going to be sextile until 2039, more or less, depending on the orb. So for the better part of the next decade, while Pluto's in Capricorn and Neptune's in Pisces, we can kind of leverage that connectedness between those two perspectives, those two energies. So Pluto, Capricorn, one way of interpreting Capricorn is conventional. So you look at your birth chart. Where is Capricorn? Right? What house does it fall in? Do you have any planets there? So that's the part of you where perhaps you're a little too rigid, you're a little too stuck. It's the part of you that's going to have to die, and it's going to have to resurrect. And then you have Pisces, and so you're going to have to awaken. So you look at Pisces. Where's Neptune in your chart? Where's Pisces in your chart? That's the part of you that's going to have to awaken. That's a part that's going to have to, Neptune in Pisces is very strong. So how do you awaken Neptune? How do you give form to this very subtle energy? Well, one thing you do is you become aware of confusion. Becoming aware of confusion is a very good way of tuning into Neptunian Piscean energy, right? And so where you have Neptune in Pisces, perhaps there's some confusion, and that's a good thing. Right? Because there's something about the confusion that's holding you back, and it's about releasing and letting go. And you do that by surrendering to the vast inner world that defies your absolute self, right? So becoming aware of awareness. So what you do is you awaken awareness, you meditate a little more, you awaken awareness, you become, this three-dimensional reality becomes like a cube of sugar in a warm bathtub, right? You recognize the world is perpetually dissolving itself, right? It's like, take a big rock, come back a million years later by the seashore, and it's gone, right? It's dissolved. And the same is true of these solid, rock-solid aspects of life that we're clinging on to. And where you have Neptune in Pisces, the time has come to allow that to dissolve. And so by awakening awareness, we can facilitate this process of just letting go of Capricorn, letting it die, and letting something, an awakened Capricorn, resurrect. Right, and so that's something that individuals can do with their own birth chart, and also look at, bring the aspects in to add a little more texture, nuance, and complexity.
So what tools can you leave us with from your perspective of how to work with everything we've all heard tonight?
Well, Neptune is in Pisces. Meditate a little more. Meditate on, I've been talking about consciousness. I believe that this perspective that I've been describing is, by the time this Neptune in Pisces transit ends, that it'll become a lot more palatable. We're just at the beginning of the process, to really awaken into your authentic nature as pure consciousness. Right? And Capricorn's the father principle. And so I believe that over the next 10 years, what's going to happen is that there's something fundamentally flawed about the father principle. The leaders in society, the people that assume responsibility for our welfare, government, so on and so forth. And you can only heal that Pluto and Capricorn wound by awakening consciousness. And so for the greater part of modern history and prehistory, we've had those who are worldly, those who rule, and those who meditate, those who pray, right? And we've had like this invisible wall between those two categories, right? And the time has come for that wall to dissolve. So within 2 or 3 elections, we might very well have an awakened president, right? Literally, right? Imagine a president sitting in the Oval Office, closing his eyes, just dissolving away and coming back with a vision of the way to guide the world forward, or CEOs, or the principals of high schools. This is the father principle playing out in different domains of daily life. And so the time has come to integrate spirituality or mysticism with the principle of responsibility. Right? It's no longer that the means justify the ends. Machiavelli's out, right? We need to kind of rewrite that book, to infuse leadership qualities with awakened awareness, to awaken the father principle, collectively and also individually within ourselves. Yeah.
So how can people get in touch with you, and what do you...
Sure. RafaelNasser.com, RafaelNasser. And yeah, I have copies of Under One Sky and another book I recently co-wrote with a Qigong master. So if anyone's interested, they're on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafi. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Rebecca, do you want to talk about any tools to leave people with, and anything else? Any final words about astrology or anything that you've heard here? And your classes, of course. And
well, it's a never-ending study, and I'm still learning, and I always will be, I think. I'm in love with astrology. I'm in love with the sky, and it's endless. It's beautiful. We're always discovering more planets. It's always changing. And I encourage anybody who's interested to really delve into it, though don't start ever giving chart readings when you don't know enough. It's very dangerous, too, to only know a certain amount. And before you can really start working with it, you kind of have to know your natal chart. So I'll do a little bit of self-promotion here.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, I do teach a class if anybody's interested in learning about their natal chart. Not only that, but learning how to do astrology, learning how to read astrological charts. I've been teaching this class for about 7 years. I teach a 12-week beginner's class, and I teach a 12-week intermediate class. And then I also run a continuing studies program every Sunday for longtime students that have been going for 7 years, new students. It's an open class every Sunday at 4:30. So all kinds of people go to that one. But then the 12-week classes are every Sunday as well at 6:30. So I was very lucky in the last year that an old student of mine opened up an astrology school in New York, which was a really exciting thing. So it's the first astrology actual school in New York that I had heard of that wasn't anything else except for astrology. So as soon as he opened it up, he invited me to become a teacher.
What's it called? That's a school
It's called Nightlight. Mm-hmm. And previous to that, I was teaching astrology at Atmananda for like 7 years, which is a spa yoga center in New York. Probably many of you have been there. And anyway, so now I have an actual school to teach at, which is fantastic. So I truly love it. If you're interested in the classes and workshops, I have these postcards over there and at the front, and you can come talk to me about it as well. I have early sign-up dates and everything. The beginner's class starts on October 2nd. So if you're just curious about learning more in astrology, you can always come to the Sunday open classes, of which are on here too. And you just...
Is there any, but like, can you give us a little taste of what you would teach? Like any little tool that people can take home with them and
Absolutely.
start? Yeah.
Okay. Well, since all you might know is your sun sign right now, you might not have your whole chart. I don't expect all of you to have your natal chart. Basically, we're here to be ourselves. We're here to, and to be yourself, you kind of have to know yourself. So I would recommend to start out with, if you can find out your moon sign, great. But start with the sun sign, okay? Learn about it. Learn all you can about it, and create a meditation for yourself with that sun sign. See yourself as that archetype. Create a spaciousness inside you where you can really breathe in that sign, you can resonate with it, and you can become it. Now that is your sun part. There's also a moon sign and many other parts to your chart. But first, you can start with the sun sign and to sort of learn about it mostly, embody it, but you cannot stop there. I think that once you start with a sun sign, you say, okay, I want to find out my moon sign and my rising. Your rising is what you show to the world. Your moon sign is your nurturing. It's how you receive. It's how you were born. And you know, each planet, Venus and Mars, talk about your passion signature. Each planet is a very different part of you, and they're all valid. And I recommend that we all kind of work on becoming each one to its best, each one to its fullest potential.
So know thyself, you're saying, really.
Know thyself, absolutely. And also, once that is all done, and I recommend to understand the cycles as well and how they relate to you. And that's such a beautiful process.
Thank you.
Step into. So thank you for having me.
That's Rebecca Gordon. Monte Taylor.
Oops, sorry. To make it very simple and practical, you ask for tools.
Yeah.
Quite simply, if you can divide your age by 7, you're in a period of time where you are either going to be tested or supported according to how on path you are. The testing serves to show you that the road is not exactly as smooth and prepared for your journey as you think. And if it is supporting you, Saturn loves to give you rewards that you've earned. So every 7 years, whatever you started 7 years ago, 14 years ago, 21 years ago, will be impacted. So that's a basic tool. Now, apart from that, every single planet has a cycle of return ranging from 1 month to, 84 years in a human lifetime. So every 2 years for Mars, every 18 months or 16 months for Venus, every 88 days for Mercury. What you started back a certain time before is going to come up from that planet's perspective. So without knowing astrology, you can know if you're in a time of change. Also, another tool, when you go to an astrologer, an awful lot of my business, frankly more than I would like of my business, is relationships. Because people are seeking themselves in other people. But to help you understand the fact that your natal chart and your progress chart and all the other return charts and relocations and everything are maps to help you actualize your free will, you can learn what role the other person or entity is playing in that. So you can take your natal chart and you can put another person's chart around it, and you will see how that person influences you, what they're bringing to you. Then you can reverse the process, put them in the middle and see what you're bringing them. You can even do that with a corporation, with a job. If you have a difficult boss, get his chart or her chart. You can figure out where is the stuck energy. Very often, I have big Wall Street executives coming to me for all kinds of crisis management. They're making millions of dollars and they can't afford to pay the nanny and everything is going crazy. And so I say, well, what were you doing 7 years ago? Oh, I changed jobs. And what happened before that? Oh, I was just getting out of economics school. And what was happening there? I said, so these are the changes, you see. If you kind of divide your age by 12, very few people here can. You're all too young. But every 12 years you're being called to expand. Where are you in your own way? Where are you trying to plant a garden in the desert? But always, if you understand that astrology is not fate, It is a fixed structure within which you have infinite free will to work and still achieve what you want. And the mythology is a language to help you understand this heritage. There's a wonderful sign on a bench in Central Park. I put it in my upcoming book. It says, myths are stories that never happened, but always are. And that's a very important thing. And then never forget, my motto is that metaphysics is merely quantum physics, poetically expressed. And if you bring those things and know you're always in a cycle and just get your directions, you can use your free will. Your free will is only as powerful as your awareness, and that's the real role of astrology. And on that, if I can be a little self-promoting.
No, but I just want to say, knowing that we're in a cycle and we're in a pattern also connects us to the cosmos. We're not a separate being.
Right.
We are part of the stars.
Basically, everybody, if you saw a surfer trying to control the wave he was riding, what would you tell him? That's where we are, especially right now. We're on a massive wave of evolutionary cosmic collective change. And change does not have to mean loss. It's change. It's upgrading. Look at what's passing away as a massive detoxification in the collective consciousness of the economy and the politics and the religion and all of our firm structures and everything. That's where you can truly get some individual optimism and confidence about where you are. Now, I do have a very extensive practice here in New York. I'm very blessed. I have flyers here and cards on the table if you'd ever want to get in touch with me. I lecture on a regular basis at the United Nations. I do regular classes at Quest Bookstore, lectures, and once in a while I can be tempted into a workshop if the theme is interesting enough. So I do hope that we've helped you tonight, and thank you, Alan, for making it possible.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Monte Taylor. Linda Joyce, yes.
I'm going to make it very simple, a few very, very simple tools. If we just take 4 signs of the zodiac, and if you can get these down right, you can go any place with them. And the first, I'm going to start with Pisces, not Aries. And Pisces is the dream. Do you have a dream of your life and what you would like it to be? If you don't have a dream of your life of what you like it to be, how can you create anything in that world? The second one, Aries, is about vision. Where do you see yourself in that dream? Are you the CEO? Are you the lead dancer? Are you the supporting character? How do you see yourself in your dream? And that will deal a lot with your self-worth, how much love you feel for yourself. Don't be afraid to stretch yourself and go for what you really want instead of what you think you deserve. You know, allow yourself in your own imagination to be where you want to be, because that's what you'll create. Because dreams and vision are the architecture that we eventually build. The third sign that I'm talking about is Taurus. What's important to you? These seem so simple, but let me tell you, very few people can answer them. Do you know what really is your priority in life? Can you really look at your value system? Not what you were taught, what you were told is important. What do you value? What works for you when you're out in the world? Decide where your limits are, because values are limitations that we impose upon ourselves so that we can have strength and structure to go out into the world and know that we're not going to be tempted and lured off of our path. If you can't be honest, if you can't say no, if you can't stand up, self-discipline to what you don't believe in, then you're going to have trouble manifesting what you want in the world. And the fourth sign that I'm going to remind you about is Gemini, which to me is about choice. But it's about the choice that you're not comfortable with. It's about taking a risk now for something you believe in and something new. Learn from everything that you do. Learn from that experience. Take a leap of faith. Take a leap of faith, because when you're in the unknown is when you really get in touch with yourself and your instincts. When you're safe, you never listen to yourself. So on those words, I'd like to say thank you. And also, Linda Joyce, lindajoyce.com. I'll put my cards out over there.
And what's the book you wrote that we talk about those questions?
I have 2 books, The Day You Were Born and The Star Within. The Star Within is about the 12 questions of the zodiac as your parents, yes.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. So, all these people do personal readings as well, so I want to thank you all for having been here. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and I do a cable show on New Realities. I love hosting panels because I always learn a lot of what our evolution is going, where it's going, and that's what we're all here for. So Krista's going to sing another song, but I want to introduce Donna, who's going to provide the drinks for tonight's little mixer. And no, here, come, and just because she's really donated this to us, and so this is Donna Ratner. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. We have an organic green drink, and we believe that healthy, authentic food is a very powerful influence on consciousness, which is what we talked about tonight. So Selnique is, as I said, an organic green drink. It's got 6 to 8 servings of fruits and vegetables in every bottle, 7 grams of protein. We want you to taste it. It's ice freezing cold. Come get your favorite flavor and take a bottle home with you. And thank you, Alan, so much for letting us join you and really connect with your audience here.
Thank you. You can be our official sponsor. Thank you. So if you just want to kind of think about everything you heard here tonight while Krista's singing the song and use it as you kind of internalize this experience. They're tools that we can use for our own life. So just think of a sentence or an idea that flashed in your head or a new way of looking at yourself and let the music take you inward so you can then use that outward. So, and thank you all for being here too. So, thank you. Okay. Do you want to lower the lights a little bit, Jodi? Yeah.
From night's blackest beauty through skies clear or cloudy, the stars' tireless light radiates long after we've turned to daisies. Mountains won't miss me. The woods won't be sorry. The earth won't be in lack of company. Even since we've turned to daisies. Washing away in streams, flooding highways, our streets namelessly empty, lost in the haven of daisies. Cities falling softly, sinking ever gently, slowly bleached out of memory, born on the fragrance of daisies. Fragrance of daisies. around me. I know that I will be aglow, blissful and ready to meet with the valley of daisies, to walk through the valley of daisies. From night's blackest beauty, through skies clear or cloudy, the earth's tireless light radiates long after we've turned to daisies. Long after we've turned to daisies.
Beautiful. Thank you. So that's Krista, Linda, and hang out, meet the astrologers, have some selnik, meet each other, and we'll do it again next month with some other interesting people. Thanks again. Thank you, Jodi.